Assalamu alaikum, very good morning to all of you. Please someone confirm, am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Afra, thank you. So today we will be talking about Islamic banking. I mean the broad features of Islamic commercial banking. If a bank is how a bank can function in an Islamic manner. We will learn about that. Not we will not go into the details. We will just learn the basic and broad features because there are specific papers in your next semester on specific, for example, retail products or uh, corporate Islamic products. So, so today we will cover that some of the products in a very brief manner. So Islamic banking and finance has been conceived as a banking and finance in consonance with the ethos and value system of Islam. Hence, it is governed in addition to the conventional good governance and risk management rules by the principles laid down by the Islamic Sharia. So all the conventional good governance and risk management system, all the good things that are there are part of Islamic banking. And in addition to those good things, in addition to those governance and risk management techniques, we have some more principles uh, which have been laid down by the Islamic Sharia. And interest in the earlier literature, Islamic banking was also known as interest-free banking. But interest-free, Islamic banking is interest-free. That's there is no. This is a no-brainer. But Islamic banking is not only about interest-free banking. So interest-free banking is a narrower concept, whereas Islamic banking is a broader concept. Some people say that why not use ethical banking instead of Islamic banking? That would be not honest again because ethics to different people may mean different things. For example, some people justify interest, uh, but there are moral grounds on the basis of which interest uh, can be judged as a bad thing for the society, for the humanity. So calling Islamic banking as ethical banking would be hypocritical because Islamic banking is based on Quran and Hadith. There is no doubt in this. So similarly, interest-free banking is a narrower concept and Islamic banking is a broader concept because Islamic banking is of course interest-free, but it also involves some, I mean, the ethics and ethos of Islam and Quran. So Islamic banking, a more general term, is expected to not only avoid interest but also avoid gharar and other unethical practices and to participate in achieving the goals of Islamic economy. So there are Maqasid al-Sharia, so that is the goals of Islamic economy. Islamic banking is supposed to achieve those broader goals. So Islamic banking is not only about interest. Interest, of course, Islamic banking is interest-free banking, but it also involves other ethics and ethos, and as well as some broader Islamic objectives. And Islamic banking is a sub branch of Islamic economics. of which Islamic finance is an important part of Islamic economics. So the broader discipline is Islamic economics, and finance is an important part of Islamic economics. When I use the word finance, what comes in your mind? And what actually should come in your mind is that, uh, investment. Finance means uh, borrowing, lending, and investment. I mean, that is called finance. I mean, if you want to think it about finance in a very specific manner, you may think of borrowing, lending, and investment. So, so Islam, all researches, all knowledge related with Islamic finance is basically a sub part of Islamic economics, which is broader area of knowledge, broader discipline, which for example, Islam economics deals with national issues also. For example, the GDP, the inflation, etc. But Islamic finance or finance is a narrower concept which deals with mostly deals with the problems of institutions, problems of specific unit. So Islamic economics, of which Islamic finance is an important part, is broadly based on some prohibitions and encouragements. The prohibition of riba and permission to trade as enshrined in verse 275 of the Holy Quran. Allah has allowed profit from trade and prohibited riba. So trade is allowed and riba is prohibited. And this is the same verse from which the concept of asset-backed transaction has come out. And it is said that Islamic banking is about asset-backed transactions. So any transaction should not be purely a transaction involving money. Money is exchanging hands from one person to another. So this is not desirable. The transaction should be asset backed. I mean, some real asset should be the subject matter of that transaction. Purely exchange of money from one hand to another is not desirable from Islamic point of view. And one of the source from which this concept emerges is this verse in which Allah says that trade is allowed, but riba is not allowed. So trade is being contrasted with riba. So riba just involves exchange of money, whereas trade involves some goods, products, and real assets, things which have value, things which have utility. So that is why sometimes in the initial literature it was said that this feature of Islamic banking was highlighted, that Islamic banking is asset-backed economy or asset-backed business or asset-backed transactions. So all Islamic banks that are Islamic are basically trying to indulge in asset-backed transactions. Even if it involves lending and borrowing also, you will learn, after some time, you will learn that even lending borrowing transactions in Islamic banks involves some assets. So Islamic banking is in a way asset-backed economy or asset-backed transactions. It involves asset-backed transactions. Financial transactions must represent real transactions of sale of goods, service, or benefits. In the context of Islamic finance, a loan will be considered only a financial transaction of funds with a guarantee for repayment in full without any benefit to the creditor. It will not be considered an investment. So the Islamic view of a loan is that it's a virtuous thing. It's a good thing, something on the basis of which God rewards humans. A person who helps other person through loan is considered a very an act of piety, a very good act, uh, a rewardable act. But that loan or that curse should be free from interest, or the helper should not benefit from this activity in any way. So this is the concept. So curse or loan is not considered an investment from Islamic point of view, and an Islamic bank does not, I mean, lend money as an investment. Uh, you already know that these three prohibitions, that is prohibition of riba, then prohibition of gharar, and then prohibition of gambling and games of chance. So all transactions should be free from these three, major prohibitions uh, in Islam. Contemporary Sharia scholars have reached the consensus that modern commercial interest comes under the purview of riba, and no form of loan based on interest is exempt from this prohibition. All forms of loans that involve interest is actually riba, so it has to be avoided. Financing on the basis of riba was a commercial profession of the rich at all times. So financing on the basis of riba was a commercial profession of the rich at all times. All loans that embody any benefit over and above the principal as a precondition are void, irrespective of the fact that the condition embodies any gain in quantity or quantity. What a bank does actually. A bank has two sides, asset side and liability side. The saving bank account or the fixed fixed deposits or the current accounts, all these are actually, and the amount of money that bank grants as a loan to the businesses is actually the asset side or the assets of the bank. Riba is involved on both sides. First, it takes riba from the businesses. For example, if the bank is lending at 15% rate of interest, and out of 15%, right now 2.5% is given as interest on saving bank account. On fixed deposits, the interest rate is around 6%. So on one hand, the bank takes interest, and on the other hand, the banks, after cutting its profit or its commission or its margin, it gives the rest to the depositors, and the difference is the profit, and the difference through that money, the expenses of the banks are also covered. So this is the concept of banking. So banks accept deposits and makes loan or grants loan to businesses. So this is the pure money, business activity of banks. So how an Islamic bank can function like this? Because riba has to be removed from the asset side also and from the liability side also. An Islamic bank is not allowed to grant loans on the basis of interest. Similarly, it is not supposed to give interest to its depositors. So there is practical problem on both sides, because the conventional banking actually works on the this basis. On the basis of interest, and on the basis of lending transactions on the basis of interest, and that is not allowed. So there are ways how an Islamic bank can function. We will just learn after just a few minutes. So on the liability side of the balance sheet, both current accounts and fixed deposits are debt from the point of view of the banks. So whatever we deposit as savers in the bank, so from the bank's point of view, it's a debt. It's the liability for the bank. Banks have to repay the principal plus interest irrespective of its commercial outcomes. So whatever rate of interest the bank has fixed, it has to pay that interest amount to us, the depositors or the savers. On the asset side, conventional banks financing takes the form of loans or debts for consumption durables or business activities like working capital finance, trade finance, project finance, micro and SME finance, government finance, etc. So on the asset side, the conventional banks uh, they grant loans and debts either for consumption purpose or for business activities or to the governments sometimes. So some scholars suggest that Islamic banks should act as traders and deal in tangible goods and should not merely act as intermediary. They may adopt universal banking model. So, so since an Islamic bank cannot function on the basis of lending as well as accepting deposit on the basis of some interest rate, so what is the alternative? So one of the alternative is that banks can act as traders instead of intermediary. So I mean, and the concept of universal banking is slightly related with this because a universal bank actually does many things apart from these two things, that is accepting deposits and granting loans. A universal bank does many other things. So similarly, an Islamic bank can also do many other things apart from these main things, that is accepting deposits and granting loans. Um, the Sharia does recognize the difference in value due to a time element and does not prohibit realizing the time value of money in a business by lunch. This is very basic concept. See, time value of money in loan is not allowed. So if I give you loan of 100 rupee and say that inflation is 6%, so you have to give me back 106 rupee after 1 year. So this is not allowed. The time value of money, the concept of time value of money in money is not allowed. But as far as goods are concerned, it's allowed. So say for example, I'm selling you something. A company is selling, say for example, car or bike to you. And the company says that if you pay me today, the price is scooty ki price 80,000. Will the price of the scooty is 80,000 if you pay cash on the spot. But if you pay in installments, say for example, in the next 2 years or next 1 year, then the price would be 90,000. So the additional 10,000 is for paying uh, paying for the for the delay in the payment. So charging more money in charging more price in credit sale is allowed, but not in the conventional sense, because in conventional sense, if you miss the installments, then cumulative interest will be charged on that money also. So uh, so whatever is the credit price, that credit price will remain fixed. I mean, your default will not impact your due amount. So this is allowed. I mean, charging less money for spot sale or for cash sale is allowed, and charging more money in credit sale is allowed. So this is one of the option in the hands of Islamic banks, and this is what they do. And on the same concept, the main product of Islamic bank, that is Murabaha, is based. So Murabaha is basically cost plus financing. So what happens is that a person approaches a bank and says that I want to purchase a bike. The bank says that okay, we will purchase that bike from the market and we will sell you that bike at 15, I mean cost plus 15% margin or cost plus 15% profit. So at whatever price the bank is able to purchase that product from the market, he will sell that product to the customer at after adding the profit for the bank, and this is known as murabaha. And then the customer is expected to repay, I mean make the payment in future. So basically this is a replication of the installment sale, but it's different. It's different because it does not involve interest on interest, and it does not involve interest. So this is murabaha, which is allowed. But there are opinions that say that although it is allowed, but the spirit in murabaha is not very good, and we cannot call it Sharia based. Although it is allowed, I mean, so but not all allowed things. So there are two things: Sharia compliant and Sharia based. So it is Sharia compliant product, but it is not Sharia based product. Murabaha is not Sharia based. And 80% of studies show that 80% of the income of Islamic banks is derived from this product, that is murabaha, cost plus financing. So there is almost a consensus among Sharia scholars that the credit price of a commodity can generally be more than its cash price. There is no issue in that, provided one price is agreed at the time of execution of the contract. But the price should be fixed. It should not be variable. It should be fixed. Time valuation is approved by the Sharia in business and trade and not in qars and that. But the concept of time valuation in loan is not allowed. In business, it is allowed. In trade, it is allowed. But in lending and borrowing transaction, the concept of time value is not allowed, because the latter are considered virtuous acts from which one cannot take any benefit. The argument that in the present age, borrowers from financial institutions belong mostly to the rich business community, and charging interest from them is not unjust is also not convincing, because this criticism rather strengthens the case against interest, because the relatively richer class takes funds at much cheaper rates vis-a-vis their profits from the business. So businesses are taking loans from banks, say for example at 15%, but those businesses are earning at, say for example, 40% or 50%. Their profit is, the margin is 50%, 60%, but they are only paying 13% or 14, 15% to the banks. So basically what is happening, the savers are actually on the receiving side, because the saving rate has come down very drastically. So right now the savers or the senior citizens are suffering because as savers we are getting very minuscule amount of interest. But and what is the reason? The reason is that the rich borrowers or the corporate houses are actually not sharing their profit with the banks. So this criticism rather strengthens the case against interest, because the relatively richer class takes funds at much cheaper rates vis-a-vis their profits from business. They give a small part of their profits in the form of interest to the banks, which is treated as an expense and ultimately charged to the customers. Thus the rich become richer, leaving the poor poorer. Interest leads to exploitation of any of the parties, the debtor or the creditor, and hence it is prohibited, irrespective of who is the exploiter in any business, in any particular transaction. In the present context, for example, due to low interest rate, savers are at the disadvantage. Savers are at the disadvantage. In US, the rate of interest on savings is actually 0. So there is no, they are not benefiting anything in any way from savings. Some people are, the Sharia scholars, Sharia courts committee and boards of various Islamic banks have not accepted the principle of indexing loan. This is one view. Some people argue that loans should be linked with an index of inflation, and whether borrower or the lender, I mean, both, a lending transaction should be linked with an index. But this view is not accepted. This view has not been accepted by Sharia scholars. If the value of that loan decreases due to inflation, it is as if the lender has done a greater virtue. The Holy Quran encourages giving extra time to borrowers who are in difficulty or faced with financial constraints. Therefore, the Fiqh Council of OIC has categorically ruled out as strictly forbidden the commonly suggested solution of indexation of a lent amount of money to the cost of living, interest rates, gross national product, growth rate, the price of gold, or some other commodity. However, so what one option is available, that is, if one wants to avoid the inflation, the lending transaction can be specified in terms of gold or in terms of silver. So, however, one can lend in terms of gold or any other currency, which is currency which is not considered vulnerable to inflation. So, if some party to a transaction thinks that a particular commodity is not vulnerable to inflation, like gold, say for example, so the loan transaction can be fixed, can be specified in terms of gold. Say for example, I'm lending you 10 grams of loan, and you have to give it to me back the 10 gram of exact 10 gram of gold after some time. So the loan that will not be called uh, uh, you know riba. So what are the other options in the hands of a bank, Islamic bank? The other options are kafala and rehan. So a bank is not allowed to lend on the basis of interest. So what it can do is, but taking surety is allowed. That is called rehan. So this is what Have you heard about Muthoot Finance? So Muthoot Finance, what it does, it takes jewelry from women and gives them loan. So surety, taking surety against loan is allowed. So similarly, Islamic banks can take surety from the customers and may grant them loans, but this loan should be interest free. So, but this surety or the rehan can act as as a security, as a safety cushion uh, against the default by the customers. Similarly, kafala means guarantee. A third person guarantees that if this person fails to repay the amount, then I will be responsible and I will be accountable for the amount of money I will repay. So when a third party guarantees the liability of a person, of the borrower, that is called kafala. So in a lending and borrowing transaction, these two things are allowed for Islamic banks, that is kafala and rehan. There are some traditional Islamic banks in India that are operating like this. Uh, they are not banks in the conventional sense. They are cooperative societies. For example, there are two banks in Bijnor, and there is one bank in. There is one cooperative society in Saharanpur also, uh, and there are some others also. Uh, some Islamic microfinance institutions are also operating. Uh, so they are doing the same thing. They accept something specifically. They accept jewelry from the woman as surety, as rehan, and they grant loans. Uh, but you might be thinking that how then granting of loan will be profitable uh, for that Islamic bank. So actually, this is not profitable for them. But Sharia boards have allowed them to charge the fee that is involved, the expense that is involved in running that scheme. So that is very minuscule. That is maybe 0.5% or maybe 1% or up to 1.5%. So that amount is actually the fees, that is the expense of that building, the rent, the salary of the person that is operating that. It's not a business profitable activity; it's a charity activity. So charging the amount that is sufficient to run that facility is allowed. So the lender can demand some security to which he may have recourse in the event of failure by the borrower to fulfill his obligation. Guarantee, the word for guarantee is kafala. The word for surety or security is rehan. Both are allowed. Guarantee is covered under the term kafala in Islamic commercial law. There are two forms of guarantee: kafala or suretyship, and rehan or pledge surety. In kafala, a third party becomes surety for the payment of a debt unpaid by the person originally liable. So if the borrower fails to make the payment, in that situation, the person who has given the guarantee or surety will be responsible for the payment. It is a guarantee given to a creditor that the debtor will pay the debt. Rehan or pledge is also a security for the recovery of debt. If the debtor fails to repay it in rehan, the debtor hands over something as a pledge to ensure the payment of debt. A pledger, a person owing a debt, is the owner of the risk and reward of the commodity pledge. The creditor is the trust. You might be surprised to know that in blockchain, the same on the concept of rehan, the lending and borrowing is taking place on blockchain. Uh, but how it has become possible? Uh, it has become possible because of the concept of rehan, because of the concept of surety. That say for example you have ethereum with you and you want to borrow dollars against that, maybe tethers. So you will deposit tethers, you will deposit your ethereum, and against that ethereum you will get dollars in your wallet. And they maintain a surety ratio. So say for example, if you will deposit 100 Ethereum whose value is $150, against that you will be given $100 loan. And the amount of interest that is charged on this is also very minuscule, and that is sufficient to cover this the expenses of this arrangement. Although this is a very new thing, this is a very new innovation. I mean, scholars, the opinions of the scholars are actually absent in this regard. But this is a new innovation that you should be aware of. And one of the leading project in this regard is Maker DAO. Maker DAO. So Maker DAO has actually come up with this innovation that lending and borrowing transaction has become possible on the blockchain. And then you might be thinking that if you have Ethereum with you, then why you are interested in borrowing against that? You have already Ethereum with you or Bitcoin with you, then why you are trying to borrow dollar against that? So the logic is that basically just like the logic that is applied in the case of when a woman approaches a bank and keeps her jewelry as surety and takes loan, because jewelry is important for her. She is not interested in selling that jewelry, but she has some immediate need for consumption, immediate need for money for some, urgent purpose. So the similar logic applies to the blockchain also, that if I have Ethereum with me, I may not be interested in selling that Ethereum, but because I'm sure that it has its future, so I will lose by selling it. So instead of selling it, let me borrow against it some amount of dollar, and I will repay that in the future. So that is also based on this concept, that is Rehan or surety. In the absence of interest as a basis of financing, Islamic banks have a number of techniques and tools to do their business. Many Islamic banks invoke the principle of profit and loss sharing for financing activity. As far as financing activity is concerned, financing means uh, the lending by the bank, either for the consumption purpose or for commercial. So since like conventional banks, Islamic banks cannot lend money on interest. So the other option is that they can participate in the productive activity on the basis of profit and loss sharing. So instead of becoming a lender, a bank will become an entrepreneur. A bank will become a promoter itself. So say for example, an entrepreneur will approach an Islamic bank for financing his venture or his business. So the bank, instead of lending money to the customer, what the bank will do? The bank will give money to the entrepreneur, but at the same time will become, say for example, 50-50% sharing of the profit between the entrepreneur and the bank. So the bank will become partial owner of the business to the business to whom the Islamic bank is financing. So Islamic finance is based on the principle of profit and loss sharing. So the responsibility, the duties, or the kinds of venture capital. With the concept of venture capital is uh, involves a lot of research, a lot of monitoring is involved, a lot of other involvement. I mean, deep involvement is involved. But in conventional banks, there is no cost of monitoring. But in Islamic bank, if an Islamic bank is financing a project on the basis of profit and loss sharing, then of course the monitoring cost will be there, because it's almost as if the bank is running that business, because since the bank is sharing the risk, the bank is sharing the risk of failure in that business with the entrepreneur. So if the bank is sharing the risk, uh, so it has to keep an eye, a very close eye. It has to keep an eye on the management of the business, on the day-to-day activities of the business. So there will be monitoring costs, which is a new type of cost, which is not there in the conventional banks, because conventional banks don't finance on the basis of profit and loss sharing. They finance on the basis of interest, and once they grant loan, normally they don't monitor what the borrower is doing with the money, unless until the amount of money is very big, very too large for the bank, and the certain monitoring is done. But normally it is not done. So some of the contracts based on the principle of profit and loss sharing are musharaka. So what are the specific contracts uh, which are based on profit and loss sharing? One is called musharaka. That musharaka is the word for partnership. Basically, the bank becomes partner in the business of the customer, in the business of the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur who approaches an Islamic bank for financing. So that is called musharaka. Muzaraba, Muzaraba means uh, one person comes up with money, another person invests his time and expertise. So in Mozarba, the bank, say for example, will finance the business, and the entrepreneur will spend his time and he will use his expertise of running that business. So that arrangement will be called Muzarba. And any, share the profit and loss can be shared in any ratio. For example, 50-50, 40-40, or whatever is agreed upon between the two parties, that is bank and the entrepreneur. So this arrangement is called Muzarba. In Musharaka, the partnership, both parties contribute some amount of capital. So the bank will contribute some amount and some amount will be contributed by the entrepreneur. But in Muzarba, one party may not contribute any amount. One party is only, contributing his expertise and participating in the management of that business. So this is the difference between Musharaka and Muzarba, which are the two main profit and loss sharing based contracts, Islamic contracts, Musharaka and Muzaraka. There are various variations in this also, Musharaka and Muzaraka. So, and their variants. So Musharaka and Muzaraba have their other variations also. Deferred trading principles, application in credit and forward sale. जैसे अभी हमने डिस्कस किया कि something can be sold at a higher price on credit. So this principle is called deferred trading principle. So some of the transactions are based on, some of the Islamic contracts are based on this principle. So by Muajjal and Salam. So Salam is basically, say for example, Salam is applicable in agricultural products. When a person says that I will purchase 500 quintal of wheat from you and makes advance payment to the farmer. So this is called Salam because the product is not available, but the buyer is making advance payment and promising that he will purchase that amount of money from him. What will be the option for non-interfering business? Non-interfering. Non-interfering, see, Islamic financing is based on profit and loss sharing. So if the bank is becoming partner, whether through Musharaka or through Muzaraba, so the bank's interest is involved in the business. So why the bank will not interfere? Because I mean, of course, he will interfere in business financing. There are, say for example, Murabaha. Murabaha contract does not involve any interference. If a machinery can be purchased using, a business machinery can be purchased on the basis of Murabaha. So in Murabaha contract, since the bank is not partner in that machinery or is not the partial owner of that machinery, so the bank will not interfere. But in Muzaraba and Musharaka, the bank will interfere or not interfere, because, of course, but actually he is partial owner of the business. So of course, it's the duty of the bank to participate in the management. Combination of shirka and ijara, and sometimes the concept of leasing is also borrowed, and leasing is also allowed, giving something on rent, that is called ijara. So this is also one major product of Islamic banks. So what Islamic bank does is it purchases certain product from the market and it leases it to the customer. And lease, the beneficiary is expected to make periodic payment after using that product, whether on the basis weekly or monthly or maybe yearly. So several transactions are constructed on the basis of ijara. Murabaha is there, written loans, Qarz Hasana is consultation with stakeholders. Okay, we will continue talking about these products in the next class also. Thank you very much for joining this class. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.